Hey y'all. Welcome to another episode of There's a Lesson Here Somewhere, where we dive into TV shows and films that are published on Tubi. We'll explore the good, the bad, and find all the lessons in between. I'm your host, Manji, and for today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the film The Pod Generation. Now, if you missed the previous episode, please be sure to check it out. We went over the series Big Mood, which is a UK drama. Season 2 is actually going to be coming out, I believe, this week. So be sure to check that one out. So let's go ahead and get into the Pod Generation. So this film is about 2 hours long, and it is a bit of like a slow starter, in my opinion. But it starts off with Rachel getting up for her day, and it's obvious we are in the future. She's living in some sort of like smart house. The food is 3D printed, and there's like some sort of like AI assistant that like follows her around everywhere. Like she has it at home and at work. So while she's here, she's like asking it, like, hey, when's the last time I wore this shirt? And then the AI assistant is like giving her update on her health. It's like very futuristic and interesting. So during this film, Rachel is having a lot of dreams. So it also starts off with a dream. And in this dream, she was pregnant. So after she finished getting ready for work and she started her commute, which she took the train, I believe this was based in New York City. She's seen a woman with a pod. So again, we are in the future, and this is a new way to procreate. So now Rachel is obviously thinking about motherhood. So now we get to Alvy, who is her husband, and we see him starting his day. And it's pretty obvious he's not that fond with the new technology. Very much so, still into nature. Like he's a botanist, so he literally works with plants as well. And he's just doing everything in his power to preserve any nature because this new society could care less about plants or just the benefits of living amongst nature. So Rachel, she works in tech, and while she's at work, her boss put her to the side to let her know that she qualified for some sort of promotion. So they was going over just like her life and was asking questions about Alvi and how he's making money because they wanted to suggest her going to the womb center, which is where they'll go to get those pods. Again, a new way to procreate. And they're basically suggesting that she start a family. And they did say that they were going to cover some of the down payment for the womb center if she and her husband decide to go in that direction. And then we cut to Alvy at work. Again, he's a botanist and a teacher. So he's teaching students about plant life. And they were at like a fig tree in which they pulled, the fruit from the tree. And the way the kids were hesitant to try the fruit because literally it came from a tree, like this generation, I'm assuming this pod generation, are so used to like 3D printed type food that it's so unnatural to them to get fruit from the earth. Like that was crazy. That blew my mind.
No one's going to eat it?
It's from the tree, Professor.
Well, yes. Exactly, Leah. That's the point. Texture is completely different when it's fresh from the tree.
So now we meet Eliza because Rachel goes to her. She or it is an AI therapist. It's like this big old eye on the wall. And Rachel is going here for some advice because she decided to do a tour or to sign up for a tour of the womb center. And she's also just entertaining the idea without mentioning any of this to her husband. And she was hesitant to tell her husband because, again, he's all about natural everything. So he definitely intended on having a natural birth, a natural pregnancy, doing it the old school way. And Alvi, he is definitely very critical of society. He mentioned that being disconnected from nature makes us all emotionally starved. And I agree. So now Rachel is at the womb center getting her tour, and it was very insightful, I would say. So at the womb center, their whole selling factor is basically making pregnancy more convenient for women. But the ultimate goal is to keep women working during pregnancy. So now women don't need to stay home or do any of the normal things that come with pregnancy because our bodies won't actually be going through it. So how this pod works is they put the fetus and everything inside this pod, which essentially looks like a large egg. and basically they feed it through this pod, and everything, the pod is basically supplying the baby with all the nutrients and just everything the baby will need in order to grow into a full, from the fetus to a baby. So basically, since the fetus isn't inside the woman will be able to freely do like the male and continue on working and living life essentially. There was a question about bonding because, as a baby is forming inside the belly of a mother, there's like a natural type bonding that forms between the mother and the child. But now that we have this new pod, bonding isn't required. So you can play music if you want for the fetus while it's in the egg. You can talk to the egg or to the fetus through the egg, and you can do those sorts of things. But bonding isn't required. You'll still get a happy baby. Once Rachel makes it back home, she finally informs her husband that she was next in line for a pod at the womb center and that she, in fact, went on a tour already at the womb center. And he was understandably upset because why would you go and make these life decisions without your partner? And essentially the father of said pod baby. So, yeah, he was upset, but I really like the way he handled his anger in this situation because I feel like if he would have overreacted a little bit more, it would have been understandable because of the situation. However, he was very gentle with Rachel, and you can tell that there is some true love in this relationship. Rachel suggested that both her and Alvy go hang out with some friends who is currently in the process of like making a pod baby, and just to, I guess, get around some people who's doing it to hopefully encourage Alvy. And that was interesting. We see like it's a couple, a man and a woman, and the man was like using like one of these little pod holders and he was holding the baby. It looks as if he was like putting in more effort to bond with the pod, while the woman, she was basking in her freedom. Her friend, she was all for the pod and this new technology because she was like, I do not want my body to go through all the things that the body goes through when it's time to create life. And she is just all for putting that fetus in the egg. So she's just talking her shit. And Alvy wasn't really feeling it.
It is the first time in history that as women, we are not victims of our biology, right? Why would any of us want to feel nauseous and gain 35 pounds, get stretch marks, swollen ankles?
And since he still wasn't feeling it, he basically suggested to Rachel to just let's just, use some more time to discuss this big change that we are trying to do in our lives. But time is of the essence because her job is paying for the down payment of the pod. So they need to answer pretty quickly. Rachel suggests that Alvy goes and speak with with Eliza, the AI therapist. And again, Alvy is all against this new technology shit. He is doing all of this solely because he loves Rachel. So he goes and speaks with Eliza. And Alvy definitely had his guard up when speaking with Eliza because he's just like, you have no conscience. Like, you can't give me advice if you can't even understand the shit that I'm going through. Essentially, is basically what he said. And this AI was just like, should I sign you up for more sessions with me? So I say all that to say, Alvy left that AI therapy session annoyed. Once Alvy made it back home to speak with Rachel again, he just realized how important this is to Rachel. So he was like, you know what? Whatever. Let's just get a pod baby. So they go to the womb center and prepare to get a pod baby. Now this part was interesting because in order to create the fetus, you obviously need the egg from the woman. However, a man isn't required in order to create a baby. So if a woman wanted to have a baby without a man, they would use like the egg and like some stem cells, and then they will create a baby, but it will have to be a girl. If you want to create a boy, you would need the man's Y chromosome, which I thought was interesting. Like I feel like this will be a great option, but not like the only way to procreate or the main way. Like they're trying to change it to make having a baby natural the unnatural way. Like I feel like this would be great for options for people who are having trouble procreating naturally. That's just my opinion. Yeah, so they can also choose the sex of the baby before creating it, but they decide to, I guess, let nature do its thing when it comes to determining the sex of the baby. But they got to watch it happened on a screen TV. So you had the egg and the sperm, and we see the sperm like swimming over to the egg, and we see them fighting to get the like we just see it on the screen rather than it happening inside the woman's body. So I don't know. It's cool, but it's also like alarming. So now that they are pregnant with a pod baby, they have to share the news with everyone. Rachel, she's like calls her parents to tell them the good news. I noticed that we actually didn't speak to Albie parents at all. It was only Rachel parents, but Rachel's father suggested that they sell their house that they have. It's like an island somewhere where it's still pretty much nature and preserved, and they bought a home over there just so they could have a place to be connected to nature because of course Alvy, but he's like, ain't no way in hell that I'm doing that. And it was really interesting though, because in the next shot we see that Rachel is working, and if you look outside the window, there's literally not a tree in sight. Like they have nature pods, so if you need to go get like that good air from nature and trees, you have to go to literally like this pod and put on a mask to breathe in the benefits of the plants. Like, ain't that crazy? Like, just have them growing outside. Like, why do we have to go and mask up for a certain amount of time of day? Like, it's we're making it more complicated. And this next scene was kind of like made me chuckle because now they have the pod baby again at the womb center, so nothing to do with Rachel's body. And so Alvia was trying to get it cracking with his wife Rachel, and she was like, "Oh, like we just got pregnant. Like we gotta wait 4 more weeks." I'm like, girl, if you don't get over here, because that's the whole purpose of doing the womb center is so you could continue to do the things that you normally wouldn't be able to do if you were pregnant. So I thought that was very funny. But it also shows that Rachel kind of don't know what to do because this is abnormal for a woman to me, to have a baby in a pod. So normally, I feel like your body, I've never had a child, so this is me assuming, but I feel like, your body will let you know the things that you need. If the baby's hungry, you're going to crave food. Like you would kind of be guided via your body. So with a fetus growing in a pod, there's no connection. So I guess she's just like, I don't know. But I thought that part was funny because, girl, what do you mean? Let's wait a couple of weeks. Girl, drop them draws. So yeah, they have like this app that helps them, I guess, know what's going on with the fetus in the pod, and immediately Rachel's like, "Do you want to hear it? Do you want to do this, and that?" But the baby just got planted in the pod, so there's literally nothing happened. But then we get to the point where I was like a couple weeks later where we finally got a heartbeat. So Alvy and Rachel went to the womb center so they could listen to their baby's heartbeat inside the pod. And since there's a heartbeat now and they can, I guess, interact with the fetus while it's in the pod, they're able to take the pod home for some time. So they do that. And before they get the pod home, Rachel is like decorating the baby room again. She's just trying to figure out what to do because I feel like she thinks she should be doing something because there's a baby coming, but it's not in, like, it's just so weird. This is so different, is what I'll say, this situation. So she's using her time to decorate the baby's room. And Alvy, he's trying to be a part of it too. And he like gets like a cute little olive tree because he's like, plant life, like it's all connected with the birth of a baby. But Rachel wasn't feeling it, so he took the plant back to his own little nature area. And just with that olive tree, it sparked the same thing that Rachel's dad was thinking, and that was to sell their home on Shell Island. And of course, Alvy is still staying 10 toes down. We not selling that house. That's literally the only way, the only source that we have to connect us to nature. And I'll be damned if I'm raising my baby in a nature pod. And I'm glad he stuck to it. So then Rachel, she goes, I think, to like the pool or like this gym area, and there's like a woman there who's like actually pregnant, like having a natural birth, is what I'll say. So she has the fetus inside her belly. Yeah, she's just like admiring her belly. And it kind of seems or looks like Rachel is getting like some sort of womb envy, is what I will call it. So she's just like trying to figure out like what's, I don't know. She just feels so disconnected from this whole pregnancy because, again, it's unnatural the way they are procreating. There was a commercial, side note, that was like, yo, if you have the proper passport, you could fly to Mars too. So, like, yeah, we are very much in the future. I will say, though, also with all this technology, it feels like there is no privacy. So like while Rachel's at work, she have her little AI assistant that's telling her how her work ethic has changed. It's lower, and that she seems a bit moody and irritated. So it's like you don't have any privacy. You have this AI monitoring your health, probably your fucking thoughts too. So you have these things that's telling you, like, that's trying to make you feel a certain way all the time rather than just letting you be a human and feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And I can see how that can drive me crazy. So now both Alvy and Rachel, they're like touring the womb center. It's like this little kid center school because apparently the government is no longer funding education, so all education is privatized. And so this womb center, the company has, I guess, their own schooling. So they go to see these kids in action, and there was an art class. And what was again very interesting is how instead of, like, kids creating the art, like nowadays, you do the finger painting, creating necklaces with macaroni, just little creative kid shit. These kids are basically guiding the electronics to create the art. So rather than creating it, they're just telling the equipment what to do and what to make. So that's their new way of creating art, which is not creating art, it's directing. So now that the pod is at home, they're kind of like a little bit overwhelmed because it's making noises and they don't really know what to do right away. But then they figured it out quickly that they have to, feed it, put this little pod thing underneath the big pod, and that feeds the baby. So Alvy took it upon himself to kind of, take the initiative to feed the baby as well, to, not leave this all up to Rachel, especially since the pod is in her belly. So they both have the ability to feed and care for the fetus in this situation. So after that, though, Alvy started kind of becoming attached and bonding with this fetus. So he bought one of those pod carriers as well. He started taking the pod to work. He started talking to it, telling it about the plants, and truly just bonding with this pod. And it's arguable that he started picking up symptoms of like a pregnant woman, because like the typical symptoms of just like being overly emotional and forgetful, like that's what he was doing. Like he left his phone in the freezer at one point. They was watching like this penguin documentary, and he started bawling his eyes out for the freaking penguins. So you can still see Rachel also feeling some type of way because again, this is supposed to come natural to her as a woman. You're supposed to just naturally have these motherly instincts, especially once you know that a baby is on the way. But again, this is a different situation. The baby is not inside her. So this is, you got to navigate this a different way. And we see a little bit more just how Alvy bonding with the pod and Rachel's inability to bond with the pod is low key affecting Rachel. So they were like out with friends and stuff, and Rachel's trying to complain to her friends about Alvy, but everything she's saying, it sounds like something you would want your partner to do when it comes to, taking care of a pod or a child. Like he's literally just taking the initiative and keeping a pod with them, and she's trying to frame it as if he's being careless.
Like he's acting reckless.
What did he do?
Well, he wears the pod in front.
Why is that reckless?
Well, because most of the dads that I see, they wear the pods, on the back.
So Rachel, she definitely attempts to try bonding with the pod a little bit more, but it's just like ineffective. So she suggests going to speak to Eliza again. She wanted to make it seem like they're both having troubles, but Alvy is having a grand time with this fucking pod now. Like he's just like, yeah, he don't even call it a pod anymore. He's like, it's a baby. I see it as a baby, while Rachel keep referring to it as a pod. So it's kind of like their attitudes about it reverse or switch. And I think this is greatly due to Alvy's ability to bond with the egg. So this new situation is very interesting because we kind of give the man the opportunity to have a baby in a sense, like to care for it while the baby is forming from a fetus to an actual baby. Yeah, so typically in a regular world, the roles are reversed. You have the mom that naturally bonds with the baby, while not saying there's a disconnect between the father and the child. However, the father do have to kind of work overtime to create that bond because the baby was inside the woman. Where it's reversed, where the baby is in this pod, and the man is easier to bond with because it's like taking a fucking football with you everywhere. Well, the woman, with us being a lot more emotional and want to be attached emotionally, it's just that disconnect. So yeah, I know I keep saying the same shit, but it's just like, wow, this is really intriguing. Yeah, they didn't really get far with Eliza. So Rachel just kind of continues to try to bond with the child. So now she's taking the pod to work, but again, she works in tech. So they're a lot like less lenient than Alvy's job at the school. So once Rachel brought the pod to work, her friend, who is the woman who's like pro womb center, pro pod baby, so the woman can be free and do whatever they want. She basically suggests to Rachel to keep the pod at home because she's going to be looking distracted and that's not going to be a good look for her. They actually had like a cabinet full of pods. So all the mothers working in this tech industry, if they, wanted to procreate with the pod and wanted to bring their baby to work, instead of keeping the baby with them, bonding with it like Albie was, it was best for them to put it up in a cabinet away from the mother, which defeats the whole purpose. You might as well just leave the pod at home. But so now it's almost time for the pod's due date. So now they are instructed to take the pod back to the womb center because the pods or the womb center have to do some neurological type things for the baby to come out how they want the baby to come out.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's not possible. No, our neuro enhancement workshop starts today, but you're welcome for parental visits.
Neuro enhancement workshop.
Oh, yeah, it's a wonderful workshop. You don't want your baby to miss out.
And Alvy isn't very fond of this. He want to keep the baby for as long as possible, or the pod until the baby is ready to enter the world. So Rachel, she ends up having a dream that she had the baby on the beach with her feet in the sand, feeling the ocean water. So this kind of triggered some sort of connection back to nature for Rachel. So once she got up, she put like the olive tree back in the baby room, like, baby steps. Once Rachel is back at work, she gets called back into the office by her boss, again, just all up in her business and emotions. And she's like, the algorithm noticed some changes in your productivity. Like, this is what I mean when I say no privacy. Like, if you're having a bad day at work, everyone's gonna know it. It's gonna, like, damn, can I just be? So like the boss is inquiring, like, is everything going great with the womb center? Is your husband too broke? So Alvy and Rachel, they take the pod back to the womb center as instructed, and they learn that they're going to shorten the pregnancy basically. So the due date that they was given will no longer be the correct due date. The baby will be out of the pod about like a week earlier. And so all the information they were just getting from the wound center and the things that they plan to do to the baby before giving it back to Alvy and Rachel kind of got their spider senses tingling. Alvy. Okay, so basically they were leaving the womb center and there were feminists out front and they were protesting against the womb. They was like, leave the wombs alone, which I thought was interesting. But while they were outside, Albie was like, hold up real quick. Let me go back inside the building for a second. He goes back inside and steals his pod. He takes some food as well so they can feed the pod while it's at home. And he's like, nah, I can't have my baby born up in this womb center. Rachel, she has another crazy dream. And in this dream, she's at a grocery store, but on the shelves, instead of food, there were babies. So she picked up a baby in the car seat and she got like some dream pods, I guess, so the baby could dream. Oh, side note, all the pod babies don't dream. For some reason, them forming in the pod gives them the inability to dream. And but the company said that they're working on it. So they came out with these dream pods that I guess you could put something on the baby's head, put the pod in, and you can select the dream for the baby. Like, this is too much control for human beings. This is too much. But this dream like alarmed Rachel. So she's like, ain't no way I want to have my baby in the womb center. So now Rachel is on board with Alvy and they decide that they are going to give birth on Shell Island again, which is their home on the island that's in the middle of nature. And there's like no people around because everybody is in these fucking pods. So Alvy, of course, being the supporting, loving husband that he is, he's like, well, we about to have this baby on Shell Island then. So he goes to the womb center and tried to like work out some deal with them. He's like, okay, we want to have a home birth. But the womb center wasn't having it. They're like, okay, yeah, the baby inside the pod is yours, However, that pod that's holding the baby is ours and it's our property and we need it back because they're expediting this whole pregnancy process because there's so many people in line wanting a pod baby. So basically, they're shortening all the pregnancies so they could use the pods for other people. But Alvin and them didn't give a fuck about none of that. So we also learned that there's a code that is needed for the pod to basically give birth at home. So there is a feature to do it, but the womb center needs to give them a code, in which, of course, they're not because they want their pod back and they think that they are just unhinged at this point. They say, fuck it. They just go to Shell Island with the baby and they going to figure out when they get there. So now we see Rachel and Alvy en route to Shell Island. And I want to say that this is probably the first time we see a nice amount of trees. Like while they're on, I think like a bus or something, we just see nothing but trees in the background. Complete drastic change from where they just came from in New York City, where it was literally just strictly concrete, like buildings. So this was very refreshing to see. And you see Alvy in his element. Like I said, he's a botanist, he's all about this plant life. So they're walking around Shell Island. He's teaching the wife all the things he know about the wild, and they just look like they are at peace. It was one moment where you see nothing but pure bliss on their face as they are just standing in silence listening to the birds chirp, the wind ruffling the leaves on the trees. Like it's just like the things money can't buy. Like beautiful. They also decide to plant the beautiful little olive tree for the baby on the island as well. So now they're back in the house and they tried to put the pod on like the charging station, I guess, and it wouldn't work. So they learned that the womb center had disconnected the pod remotely. So we also learned that the pods have about a 48-hour autonomy, meaning that it could only survive 48 hours without being on its little charger thing. But thankfully for them, the baby it's about to be born soon. So while they were sleeping, they heard the noise. So these pods, they play like a melody when the baby is ready to come into the world. And so it was playing, but faintly because, we come in towards the end of the 48-hour little time limit. So they, try to figure out what to do. Rachel was trying to figure out a code, but they have no idea what even to put for a code to open the fucking egg. So they just, use the utensils in the kitchen and just pop that. They got that egg open and a baby came out of that pod. Now that was a big baby, and I don't know how it fit in the pod, but also I don't know how these babies be fitting in our bodies like that. So yeah, it was a beautiful, I guess, or beautiful birth. And that baby was looking very healthy. So it was a successful pregnancy. Of course, they did what they needed to do, and that was return the pod pieces back to the womb center. So they went ahead and melded back to the womb center. And I feel like it's safe to assume that they are going to stay on Shell Island and raise that baby on Shell Island because that was the end of the film. We didn't get anything more. We just see them on Shell Island with that healthy baby and in nature. Let's get into the lesson. This is probably one of the easiest lessons I get to say or I get to figure out because it was pretty obvious throughout the entire film. And that is you can't replace nature. No matter how advanced humans get with technology, we will never be able to precisely recreate the things that God created. No matter who you believe in, no matter who higher power, we were created. These things here were created. We didn't just appear. And we can't outdo the doer, is basically the lesson. So I feel like us humans need to be humble when it comes to that. Like humans are like the Americans of the world or the universes, I feel, because we just think that we can outsmart the creator. And that's the fine line we dance when we get so advanced with technology. It comes to the point where we become codependent on technology. So, like reverse, we come to a point where we are so self sufficient because everything we need is here on Earth. And, like, you go out and you hunt and you get food, and then we advance and we advance and advance to the point where we can't even think for ourselves. The constant access to convenience is low key ruining us as human beings, is what I'll say. And if we get to the point where we end up praising technology and they become our gods and our heroes, I feel like that will be the start of our destruction because, yeah, I'm gonna just leave it there. And this actually makes me want to look up, see if there's like a film on like, what is it, like the story of Atlantis? Because I feel like that had something to do with like humans just taking technology too far and just becoming self-destructive. So I'm gonna look into that. But that's definitely where we are headed if we go in the route of this pod generation. So, again, the moral of the story lesson of the pod generation is that you can't outdo nature, you can't replace nature, and also that nature is essential to living a happy human life. I'll leave it there. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode of There's a Lesson Here somewhere, please be sure to like, subscribe, share this episode with a friend, spread the word on the podcast. Next podcast episode, we are going to be diving into I Got the Hookup. Masterpiece, I Got the Hookup. And I'm excited for this one because I love this movie. So I see y'all next week.